My name is Dave Heiner. I'm a physical therapist assistant with Superior Physical Therapy in Pocatello. I am also an ergonomic specialist, and I work with a lot of companies around the area doing different ergonomic work, injury prevention type work, and it's become a passion of mine over the last few years. Myself, Kylie, and Brandon will be presenting today. We're going to be discussing some of the things we do with companies around the area. And it sounds like a lot of you are familiar with some of it. We've done a lot of work with Simplot and Bush and Patronus in the past. But I was hoping to shed a little bit more light on kind of the processes of things that we do with your companies and other services that possibly would benefit you at your companies as well. So I'm going to go ahead and start, and I'm going to talk about something called functional job analysis. Brandon, Kylie, and we were all trained by a company called Workwell. And Workwell is a company out of Minnesota that teaches all about ergonomics, everything ergonomics, everything about injury prevention in the workplace. They're kind of the gold standard education. It's really internationally. They travel all over the world and do seminars and teachings. And so we had the opportunity to get certified through Workwell to perform functional job analysis and post-offer employment training. So with functional job analysis, I just wanted to go through a brief slideshow with you guys and kind of explain what that is. So functional job analysis, we're going to go over, first we'll give you a definition. It's a method of identifying, evaluating the physical aspects of work. It involves analysis of the work, the worker, and the work site, the human element, the tasks performed, and the physical structure in which work is performed all play a part in forming a work function. That's kind of a mouthful there. But essentially, it's very specific when we're analyzing different jobs and the functions and critical demands that are associated with those jobs. So, how can we use the data that we gather in a functional job analysis? This is a table that is very helpful, provided by that Workwell handbook on different types of things that we can do within our separate companies on utilizing this data that's gathered. So we generate functional job descriptions from the information that we get through a functional job analysis. And I'll go over that a little bit later in my slideshow, give you guys an example of that. But from there, we have very specific tasks that each worker in each job is going to be performing. And from there, we can really use that information for a myriad of different things. I'm not going to read these word for word, just kind of give you an idea by looking at it here. But essentially, we can do a lot of injury prevention through screening before new employees start working. We can do post-injury rehab type things, either in the clinic or on site. A lot of education. We've got a lot of good stretching programs and exercise programs in place with companies around the area. I've even seen some companies utilize job rotation strategies from from the things they learn from these job descriptions and these analyses. So a lot of different things that we can apply the data and the information that's gathered through these. I just wanted to continue with a few more definitions, and these are from the U.S. Department of Labor on workday frequencies that are associated with these analyses. And so basically, it just kind of breaks down the type of task and really how long it takes to perform that task. And you can see in the table there, it's broken down in percentages from 0 to 100% in those frequencies. And we'll go over that a little bit more as we continue here. And then also the physical demand level along with those frequencies. This one is pretty important, something that we can really determine the type of job and how much heavy lifting there is, and really the classification of each of those jobs when we go and measure these jobs. Give you a second to look that over. And then on this next one, you probably heard me say the term physical demand or critical demands. So that's a really big part of these functional job analyses that are performed is we go to each job task. So there's a function. So for example, let's just say operating a forklift is a function. And some of the tasks that are associated with that function are going to be turning the steering wheel or sitting. And trunk rotation is going to be a critical demand with sitting and operating that as well. So it can get a little repetitive, but those critical demands are really what we're looking at from a physical therapy perspective, because that's what we're trained to do. What we learn in school is all these different ergonomic positions and how to modify them to be the most safe and the most mechanically stable. So here's a list of some of those. Lifting, obviously, I can't think of a single job that I've ever done or heard of that doesn't involve some sort of lifting or carrying. Even the ones that you wouldn't think involve very much lifting, you'd be surprised how much lifting is involved in any given work week. Pushing and pulling, that goes kind of right along with the lifting. And reaching, even without a ton of weight, reaching puts a lot of stress and strain on your low back and on your spine. Forward bending, rotation, standing work. Hold it here for just a second so we can see some of those values. This is also going to be recorded if you want to go back through and look at it later. Crouching, kneeling, crawling, balance activities. That one's a big one. Brandon will go over more of that when he discusses the post-offer employment testing, but we do a lot of balance in some of those tests, and we find a lot of balance is involved in most everyday jobs, especially the physically demanding ones. And of course, walking, stair climbing, maybe getting to and from your office every day, having to do a flight of stairs. Gripping, pinching, hand-finger coordination. Okay. Now you guys get a look at some lovely pictures of me while I'm performing a functional job analysis. So what I wanted to do with these pictures, the reason I put them in there is to give you an example of how specific we get. We're measuring different heights of each one of these steps. In this case, it's with mowing and grounds maintenance job, lifting the ramp up and down, all those different things. But what I wanted to do is get you guys involved here, so you don't have to listen to me drone on this slideshow. What critical demands do you see just by looking at these pictures? There's a lot of them.
Be the stair climbing onto the lawnmowers and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Stepping up,
Being
I think.
able to,
Oh, go ahead.
oh, sorry. I was going to say being able to lift that ramp up to the truck bed.
You're right. Exactly. And that ramp is not light. I think we measured that to be close to about 50 pounds. Pretty heavy.
Well, and it's not just a straight lift, you're forward leaning at the same time.
Right. We don't need to break apart my ergonomics and my posture. I was in a hurry, but still, you can kind of see when you get in a hurry on the job, things that can possibly affect your body, your joints, all the stresses and strains. Good. I have another video here. Sarah was kind enough to volunteer for this. She was showing me a specific lift that you really wouldn't think about unless you're the person doing the job, involving trimming, weed whacking. Oh, never mind. There's a video of me pushing the lawnmower up the ramp first. So I'm actually measuring the amount of force it takes to push this lawnmower up the ramp. There doesn't need to be audio if you guys can't hear it.
So you have a little machine on there that's telling you how much force it takes, or
Yep, that's called a force dynamometer. It measures force. You can measure all sorts of different vectors and push-pull angles. We actually use that as part of our testing process as well. It's very specific. I think that ended up being right at the top when it gets kind of stuck on the lip. It ended up being about 78 pounds. You wouldn't think you would have that much force with a little mower like that, but they can get kind of heavy. Okay, this is the one I was talking about where Sarah's lifting the trimmer. So just pay attention to how she lifts this. So she's demonstrating edging there. So what are some immediate concerns that we're seeing or possible injuries that we're seeing there for somebody that's not used to doing that every single day?
They may need to change the fulcrum to where it's not bottom heavy or top heavy so it can balance a little bit better.
Yeah, because otherwise I feel like you're looking at shoulder and upper back injuries, as well as any other arm, like elbow or anything like that. But shoulder and upper back for sure would start hurting after doing that for too long.
Those are a lot of the concerns that they were bringing up to me and that I was bringing up to them. They do have holster or braces that they can clip the trimmer on around their shoulders and around their backs. But honestly, they just don't. Most people just don't use them because they're kind of a pain in the butt to use, take them on and off, and it's just quicker to go through the job there. But by doing this analysis, we kind of raised some concerns there. A lot of my biggest concern was when she tilted her arm up. Her arm was at about a 90-degree angle there, and that's a lot of pressure on your shoulder. She also rotated her wrists as well, which doing that repetitively, it's asking for an injury. And so we're in the process right now. This is with ISU. We're in the process of working out some stretch and flex program for them and for those workers to really condition their bodies to be able to do those things to reduce injury risk. Okay, we've already watched that. Okay, so I wanted to show you guys a quick sample job description and then we'll move on. So we had that little hiccup. So this is a very condensed version of a job description here. I wanted to show this one just because there's pictures associated with it. We can really, there's a lot of different ways we can put these together through the software we use. But you can see how there's a function and then there's a task. And then this one has the critical demands all summarized in an overview at the end, which saves a lot of paperwork. Or we can organize it so there's critical demands under each task as well, so that if you're utilizing these job descriptions with new hires, for example, it just breaks it right down when you're showing them what they're going to be doing, and they can see, oh, there's a 80-pound lift here. Oh, I need to rotate my wrist. I need to lift my shoulder to a 90-degree angle. Gives them a really good specific idea of what they're going to be doing in a work day. We could go on about FJAs for a really long time. But in a nutshell, that's essentially what we do with the functional job analysis, very specific measurements. And then we can, as I showed you in the slide before, we can utilize that data and information for a lot of different things that are very, very helpful in injury prevention tactics and even hiring tactics, placement. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Brandon. He's going to discuss our POET, post-offer employment training.
Brandon Johnson. I'm a physical therapist assistant in Pocatello, Idaho, with our Vista location. I'm also a ergonomic specialist working hand in hand with Dave and Kylie. So what I'm going to talk about is a POET, or as I'm going to explain here in a minute, what they are is called a post-offer employment test. This is a test based on the information that we gathered from the functional job assessment. It basically gives to, like, I believe her name is Sherry from Patronus. They said they send people over to us, and we have already done this test for them. So we've been able to see exactly what the physical demands are for that particular job. And then we can make a test specifically for them to say, okay, this is what you're going to have to do in a day. So we can have them do it safely throughout their day. Another thing this is called a pre-work screen, or a fit for duty. Now we can use this as a return to work. So if a person under your employment and we have one of these gets injured, they can go back to therapy, get all better, and then they can return and do this again to make sure that they can return to work safely without risk of re-injury. So we build them using that information, like Dave said, using that functional job assessment, using all of those critical demands and all that detailed information that we gather in the functional job assessment. We can better create a overall example of what they would be doing or having being done on a day-to-day basis. As it says here, we never over test, so that's why we go through and we test each and everything a little bit at a time. The other thing we do is we do what's called a validation. We do this with a functional job assessment as well as the POET. Basically, we take what we've built back to the company, have the people who do the job look at it, say, okay, yeah, this is not over what we do. This is very accurate as to what we do in a day, and it simulates it, and then we make sure that we're not over testing. So the way they are performed, first thing we do, I'm going to show a little clip here. I hope it works. It worked when I tried it, but we'll see. And there is no sound with this. Let's see if it'll work here. So here I have a guy here, and we say we bring him in to do testing. All we're going to do is we are going to test his range of motion, test his overall strength in his shoulders, his neck, his back, his hips, his knees, ankles sometimes, just to determine if he is physically capable of performing the test we're about to perform. We also test balance, and we instruct in proper lifting techniques, so squatting down, so as to reduce the risk of injury later in the job in this POET, but also to as training for the individual jobs. So this is the point at which we would be testing the balance in this little startup. This is an example of one of the tests that has been created. This is a test that we actually have and we perform regularly at Superior right now. Give you a second to look at it. So the critical demands, as Dave explained, are on the left: the carrying, pulling, gripping, the low work, standing, forward, bending, and stuff like that are all there. How we've designed the test to mimic what they'd be doing in a day. And then over on the left, you see the score and the weights and everything like that. I'll show you here in a minute a lifting one where we have to carry something or lift something off the ground up to different heights. And we usually start at a low weight, going up to the max weight that is required for that job, so as to kind of work them up to doing it. We usually give them several different times to try to do it, but And this is all based on the information we gather from the functional job assessment. So we really can't do this until we've done the functional job assessment. And this will be tailored to the particular job that we do the functional job assessment for. So then moving on, so we can do pretty much anything. So the lift test here. So here we have a lift station is what we call it. And you can see on the left-hand side, there's those grooves where we can adjust the shelves to any kind of height that we need. And we have this in all of our clinics so that we can replicate the exact same test over and over again for everybody, no matter where they're doing their testing at. So you'll notice here we teach them how to squat properly so that they're not injuring their back. And we have them do it at several different heights, whatever is, again, required for that particular job. Another one called the ladder test. And again, these are just examples of the different ones we can do. They're not obviously for every specific job. Some of them are different. This particular one, a ladder test, so we can have them climb up the ladder to a certain height and then back down to simulate walking up a bunch of stairs that are kind of like a fixed ladder on a wall. Here I'm having him step up to a height similar to like what you'd be stepping up into a heavy piece of heavy equipment. So there's that way of doing it as well. And then we have, a ladder test. So then at the Vista Clinic, we have another piece of equipment called the Primus or BTE. So this is a different type of piece of equipment that we have that I'm kind of excited to have the ability to use. I think I'll just talk a little bit about it instead of having the video go through. So it's called a Baltimore Technologies piece of equipment. Pardon that name. I think I got it wrong. But what we can do is we can use this. So the piece that's right there where it says Primus on it, that is called the head. It will move up and down, and we can put it in almost any direction. I'm explaining here one job that I actually did a functional job assessment for. They managed water in pipes and stuff like that to facilitate the production of potatoes. And in order to control the flow of the water, they had to open and close valves. Now, the valves are not always in the most accessible locations nor positions. This particular valve that was difficult to reach was approximately 5.5 feet off the ground underneath a grate. They had to climb in underneath and actually turn this valve. And it was probably a 50-pound turn. So they had to be able to reach up here. So we were able to test with this machine in order to get that specific critical demand. And you can see here he's closing the valve and then it can go the other way. With this machine, we can adjust to almost any particular weight that will be required. And then we move over here. We have one other one that's another pulling example. So just showing the range that this machine is capable of doing for the different jobs that are similar to how Dave was doing, had lawnmowers. I saw this one and I was like, oh, well, that would be perfect. Testing for a lawnmower pull kind of thing. We can also do like sweeping floors and everything like that, kind of to simulate the overall thing that they would be doing in a day. And so why do we need these? Why do we do them? We need to do them so that we can prevent and reduce the number of injuries, or especially the preventable injuries due to having someone who is particularly unfit. So if they have a shoulder injury and their job might include doing things overhead, they're probably not going to do the best at that job, or likely going to have another injury. Doing the tests, we can discover if they might have a potential injury that might land them on workman's comp within the first 4 to 6 months, which is not exactly beneficial on the bottom line. So I have here an excerpt of an interview with Gamma with the Idaho Smokehouse Partners, formerly Golden Valley, and he's talking a little bit about the fit for duty testing that we're doing for them.
Have taken in your own experience to make sure that employees don't get hurt, or if they do get hurt, that they can return to work safely?
I think since we started, since we partnered with you guys with the Fit for Duty, I think it seems to be a lot more thorough, right? So then my conversation when I meet with the new employees, right, that it's you were pulling, you were pushing, you were, bending. It might have been 15, 20 minutes, but just remember, this is what you're going to do all day long, right? So you have to be able to perform those tasks safely for 8 hours a day, 10 hours a day, whatever their schedule is. Mm-hmm. So, a lot of the information, or I think just seeing it live, then also for me, okay, this makes sense. This is exactly what you're going to be doing. Or like the employees who are pushing the cart, okay, this is what you were doing in the Fit for Duty. Now you can see it live as we're doing the tour of the facility. So that way we can connect the Fit for Duty with the actual real life job activities that they'll be doing.
And that's what I have. So I'll turn the time now over to Kylie Jolly.
My name is Kylie Jolly. I'm a physical therapist assistant here in Idaho Falls for Superior Physical Therapy. I'm doing the ergonomic stuff as well and have worked with a few different companies trying to help them prevent big injuries as well as being able to help stop smaller ones from becoming bigger ones when they do happen. I'm supposed to cover the first aid kind of section of ergonomics. So first aids kind of tie in with the FJAs and POETS because of the fact that if we know kind of what an employee has to do and is required to do on the job, when they do come in for first aids, which I'll getting ahead a little bit, but anyway, we can be able to kind of help understand what we need to do to truly get them better and get them back to work safely. So first aids is basically just first aid treatment that is preventing small injuries from becoming bigger ones, and being able to help them, help the company themselves not have as expensive or invasive care with the person that's been injured. First aids can be done in a few different ways. They can be done on site or in the clinic. We have kind of a few different companies that we've done a little bit of both with. On site, they both have their benefits. On a site gives us the ability to help the employees before or after work, which sometimes talking with Western Smokehouse Partners, they kind of have mentioned that sometimes with physical therapy as well as like injuries in general, sometimes they have a hard time with their employees finding time in their schedule just because it's hard. I mean, everybody's got lives after work and things like that. And so sometimes that on-site gives us that ability to be able to work it in before or after work or kind of on a lunch hour even. And sometimes that helps with just more consistent intervention, which can help in the long run. Yeah, in the clinic isn't much different. Sometimes it's just, it comes down to more or less the schedule that sometimes it's just hard, but that always just depends. So, some of the things that we can provide and do for first aids when somebody does get hurt, we have to make sure we follow certain guidelines so that we're preventing what we call a recordable OSHA injury. And so therefore we're allowed to do pretty much any massage of any kind. For those that are PTs or PTAs, I always like to think of it as a PTA. Basically, you can do pretty much the exact same thing that you always do. A PT, you have to be a little more careful just because there are certain things that you're legally able to do in the clinic for a normal physical therapy visit, but you're not able to do that during first aid because that will turn it into a recordable injury. And then it creates problems for the company just because then now they have a recordable when we were hoping that we didn't have to. We can use any of our like massage tools, such as like scraping kind of tools, if you've ever seen or done any of that type of stuff. We just have to, on our part, which this doesn't necessarily affect the company or affect the employee, but we just have to make sure that we document it differently. Just because of the fact that we can't name like use there's like a name brand called Graston, and we just can't document that that's what we did. It just has to be kind of more generic, which again, not necessarily affects the company or the employee, but more on our end of when we do these first aids. We're not able to do e-stim, but we are able to do hot or cold packs. I was told, and I could be wrong, so correct me if I'm wrong, anybody that does know, but I was told that we can do ultrasound, which here at Superior we do in pretty much every single clinic that we're able to do it. It's a super cool benefit because of the fact that it can help prevent, like say you come in with a shoulder injury, we can do an ultrasound right then and there and be able to know if we need to send you more for invasive kind of intensive care or if it's something that is treatable with therapy.
Right.
Um,
So just to clarify that,
yes, go ahead, Kurt.
I believe you're allowed to do diagnostic ultrasound,
Yes.
but not therapeutic ultrasound.
Yes, thank you for the clarification, Kurt. That is exactly what. Yes. Yeah, so that's kind of the benefit of it is that hopefully we'll be able to find out whether or not, you have a tear or something in your shoulder before we try to fix it and do all these things and then, we're 6 weeks in and it's like you're still the same kind of thing. So we're hoping that we can prevent that longer time span for a first aid when maybe you need quicker intervention in general. Um, yeah. So then one of the questions that we had online was with the invites was what kind of language we can use to ensure that referrals are for first aid rather than PT. So with some of the companies, and it always kind of depends. We do always want to make sure we check with the providers that you're working with for the companies. So one of the companies that we work with is they have a Sterling Urgent Care that's not that far down the road from them. And that is one thing that we need to talk with the providers about is making sure that they understand what first aids are as well as what we can do so that if they feel like it is something that we're able to treat with first aid, they will refer it as first aid treatment instead of physical therapy, which will then make it so that it's not a recordable injury at that time.
Few questions in the chat here. So one says, curious about the time frame and cost of an FJA. That is a fantastic question. And the answer is it depends. It depends on the job. Some jobs take a lot longer to measure than others do. That one that I was doing at ISU for the groundskeeping. They had a more specific job title, but I can't remember off the top of my head. Oh yeah, senior landscaping technician. That was the job title. That one wasn't too bad. We got that one done in about an hour or so. If you add up the documentation time, the paperwork time, and then the follow-up meetings for validations and things like Brandon mentioned, you're probably looking at about 3 hours total for an average job. And as far as the cost goes, that's completely negotiable. Our company right now, we've been just charging pretty much what the market rate is at about $130 an hour. Very negotiable though. So cost is probably we try to make that the least of the worries of everything. Our main focus is saving your company money and keeping your employees safe and healthy.
I was just going to add on to that a little bit, David, as well, was that with the costs, sometimes we've broken it down into job specific kind of thing. So if we weren't like what David was already saying was if we weren't there for, maybe quite an hour instead of doing that hourly rate kind of thing, we have done more kind of like we'll do one FJA like for this specific cost at this job, if that makes sense, because it's just like the one. And then later on, we can do another one if you feel like it's being helpful or if we want to explore more options. I don't know if that's helpful, but
No, absolutely. Yeah, there's a lot of options. And this is where, like Kurt was saying, we really try to have a good relationship with a safety manager, or some cases a HR representative. It kind of handles that as well. The question in the chat, with POETS, do we include all critical demands or just the more difficult ones or more repetitive ones? That's a really good question. You want me to answer that one, Brandon, or do you want to answer that one?
I can answer that one. So usually what we do is we will look at those critical demands and choose generally the more difficult ones that require more physical exertion because they're obviously going to be a little bit more difficult and strain the person a little bit more. Now, we don't necessarily want to over test like we talked about, but we want to make sure that they're physically going to be able to do the job. If they're going to be standing for 50% of the day, but yet they're going to be lifting, during that also 50% of the day, we want to make sure that we're testing the lifting and not just the standing. So obviously we have all those critical demands. And like Dave showed, there is a huge list of critical demands that will be produced by an FJA, but we can kind of narrow it down to a smaller list and work on that list as far as which ones we're going to test on.
Yeah. To add on to that too, a lot of times there is overlap. So if you have a repetitive lift at 24 inches from the floor to 24 inches, repetitive lift from the floor to 36 inches, if you do a floor to 36-inch lift, you can cover the 24 inches within that lift. If someone can lift to 36 inches, they're likely able to lift to 24 inches as well. But again, part of the answer is it depends. It depends on the job, and it depends on the employer as well. Some employers want these to be as specific as possible, and they want them to be repetitive because that's the nature of the job. If someone's flipping tortillas all day long for 8 hours a day, then we need to have a lot of repetition in these types of testing situations. But that's one of the reasons why I really love doing what I do is we have a lot of freedom to be imaginative and really try to help people understand what it is they're going to be doing for real in a physical sense of what they're going to be doing rather than just on paper. But we can really kind of be inventive with these tests as well, as long as it's along with what is being done on the job specifically. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for joining our webinar. Again, we're having another seminar here in about a month. I'll make sure to get some information out on that. And we'll see you guys then.